Welcome to another edition of Ori Lifestyle Inclusive Beauty Podcast. My name is Sutilalami Bello, and today I am here with a familiar face, Funmi Akomu. Today actually is a slightly different type of podcast. You can see I am very much relaxed. I'm even barefoot here. But we're going to be talking about two serious topics. The first is edges. That area of hair around your temple, which I see so many women complain about. They're losing their edges are thinning. What should they do to grow it back? Should they be using specific oils? Should they use minoxidil? Should they do something else? And I've even coached women who have gone on to have hair implants in those areas. I know it's one of the areas that can be devastating to many women's hair journey, especially when the hair on the head in other areas are improving, but that stubborn edge remains that stubborn, non-responsive to everything that you've done. And I've been there. It took about 3 years for my edges to slightly recover. And I say slightly recover because I have accepted that my edges will not be where they were before I started to really traumatize them. And I've accepted that in a sense. But some people's damage is so extensive that they can't accept that. And so they do everything possible, which sometimes leads to things like snake oils and all these other fads that don't end up working. What I want us to explore today is what we can do, how we can intervene, perhaps what the science or the research is telling us about what works and what certainly doesn't work. And after we've talked about edges, we're going to touch on the second most heart-wrenching issue that I get from a lot of women, which is around dry scalp, flaky scalp, because those come through a lot. I've got Funmi with me today, and you've seen her in the series, in and out, on different episodes quite a bit. But today she's really a patient who has been through the ups and downs of trying to grow her own edges back, as well as trying to manage her dry scalp. So welcome, Funmi.
Hi. So I'm like your case study today.
You are like my case study. Yes, you are a case study. And you know what? I love you as a case study because you are an informed consumer. So I call somebody an informed consumer when they have a level of knowledge and when they're not easily swayed by marketing tactics. And I've really deliberately chosen edges and dry scalp, almost building this around you because those are the struggles. And I know that you've been through a journey. So maybe let's start with the journey of actually going down the healthy hair route. How did it start for you?
Okay, so Titi, the first thing I'm going to start off saying is time is one of the biggest challenges or the biggest opposers when you're talking about recovering from what I would call hair damage. So I want to just put that out first and foremost, and we'll probably circle back to it. So speaking about my journey or my experience, I was never that person who documented when my natural hair journey started or how old is my natural hair. I had natural hair growing up. I relaxed my hair myself when I was in secondary school, just experimenting. And then from there, just always had like relaxers put in. And looking back now, actually going through really terrible hair practices for many years. And then I kind of hit my 30s and sort of awareness started coming because I think up until that point, you know, it was okay to cover up damages in order to present a particular beauty standard, so to speak, as opposed to addressing whatever the issue was. And I think it actually started because I was dealing with some skin problems and I was seeing somebody about that. And so that then translated to, you know, yes, you could sort your skin out, but what about your hair? What about your scalp? And then Ori Lifestyle also came on the scene. And I think just having that advantage of, close contact.
Having a personal friend.
And I think also one thing that I had to kind of be introspective about is like your friends who have the right knowledge will challenge you.
True. Very
and
true.
And they kind of, there's that phrase that goes, show me your friend and I'll tell you who you are. And it's like, how can my friend be Ori by Titi and like, I don't actually, and I was getting free advice, so I became more intentional about it. I didn't do a big chop. I didn't initially. I just stopped relaxing my hair. But what had happened is, I think when I was relaxing my hair, I didn't actually notice the loss of hair around my edges.
Okay.
I think perhaps because with a relaxer, you have that what people call slick back look, that shiny look. Yeah. So although I was losing hair around my edges, I didn't actually notice it. So I do like relaxers and then put a weave in straight away, like a sew-in weave straight away. And so this was all like pressure. And now talking about how that hair loss actually happened. It was that repeated sort of poor practice in hairstyling that resulted in it. So at some point, I think after just being on that journey, mostly with Ori Lifestyle, I was never that person who was going on YouTube. Yeah. You know me, like people say, oh, you can learn it on YouTube. I don't go to YouTube.
Yeah.
So.
I think a lot of people don't understand that there is actually a skill in curating information.
Yes.
So a lot of people say, for example, my course, you can get all the information on YouTube. Please, I welcome you. Please go on YouTube and do it the way that I did it. And then you would understand that you need to wield through a lot of the weed from the shaft before you actually get to the gem. And then you have to do loads of trials and errors. And what we do is curate the information for you. And you know what? The beauty of curating information isn't just dumping a lot of information on people. It is actually focusing the mind on the things that are going to make a difference. So I agree with you that when you have somebody that you trust, you can bypass a lot of time wasted by just actually using that person to get to the outcome that you desire.
Exactly. So trust is another word. So I've mentioned time and trust. So as a result of that, I then started kind of taking active steps, actually actively and intentionally making decisions. And you know this, we had conversations. I booked consultations with, a hair clinic where they specialized in hair loss. And so I did an assessment and they said, well, you have what we call...
Sorry, just to go, I just want to go back for our listeners. Yeah. So you stopped relaxing your hair, started to take better care of your hair, and
then the edges became really noticeable. The actual loss of hair, significant loss of hair, became noticeable because now my hair was kind of more in its natural state. It was still suffering from a lot of damage, so it wasn't at its best, but the damage was becoming pretty much obvious, definitely to my eyes. And then at that point, I was like, did I make the right decision in stopping the relaxers and stopping the weaves and the wigs? So I was still wearing, styles, really heavy styles, a lot of them to try and obviously give an appearance of what I wanted or what I preferred. So I think the turning point, I would say, was when I had that consultation.
And do you feel comfortable mentioning where you went to? Because I think people just, for full transparency.
Yeah, it was in the UK, in London. It's called the Belgravia Hair Clinic. And so I just booked an appointment. It was a free consultation. And, the lady saw me, they took pictures, they did assessments, and then she started talking about traction alopecia. And, like when it wasn't new to me, the word wasn't new to me, but like when you think of a word, you think about other people.
Yes, of course.
But then now it's been said that I had traction alopecia at that point.
And can we pause on what traction alopecia is for somebody that may be hearing it for the first time?
So traction alopecia is a type of hair loss that is attributed majorly, mainly to pressure or what they call traction on the hair. And it is mostly common around the edges because that is where you have what, well, is termed baby hair or the most delicate, part of your hair. So traction or pressure on that area resulting in damage to the hair follicles then results in hair loss. Sometimes not reversible.
And what was the cause of your own traction alopecia? So for me, my traction alopecia was because mostly of braids and then back-to-back weaves, not really wigs. I know some people develop traction alopecia from wigs, but mine were mostly braids and back-to-back wigs. What was yours?
Same. So at that point, basically what the person I saw, the clinician I saw said was, she said, it's mostly to do with your hairstyling.
Yeah.
She was like, do you wear braids? Obviously, they specialize in different types of hair, so Caucasian. And that was one of the reasons I was particular about where I went to. I had checked their resume and I said, I want somewhere where they're familiar with Afro-textured hair.
Yeah.
And they were. And she said, yes, it's usually your styling. And she was asking me, how do you generally style your hair? And she said, it's predominantly as a result of that.
And just to say, our white cousins, they have traction alopecia too, but sometimes that presents because they put their hair in a bun all the time. And so that tension is still
literally
caused.
anything that puts some level of friction, tightness, tension on your scalp and as a result on your hair follicles. They did blood work, which is routine, to check that is there anything else
that could be causing it,
contributing to it or causing it.
I think that's really important because, of course, we know that not all hair loss around the edges area is caused by traction alopecia.
Yeah.
There may be other reasons for it. So really it is important to go to somewhere that knows what they're doing and offer you that additional assessment in terms of a blood work.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think after the blood work and just putting all that information together, the diagnosis was traction alopecia as a result of hair practice and styling technique. And so it was now a case of what do we then do? So the first thing she said was, well, I think it's reversible.
Okay,
because
that's good.
they do kind of look, they have equipment. It's not overly sophisticated equipment, but they look closely at your scalp. Right. And she said, I think you still have healthy follicles that can recover if the right approach is taken. And so then they talked to me through what their options were.
And I think, I'm sorry to keep interrupting you,
That's
but
okay.
I just think that it's such a learning opportunity because if you've noticed that you've got hair loss on your edges, and you buy a random oil and you start rubbing your hair with a random oil, first of all, you haven't had the assessment to determine whether or not it is recoverable and what can be done properly. And in actually starting to rub things on your scalp or your edges, you may actually be introducing more damage or delaying the effectiveness of something that may be able to help you. So I'm saying that to say, if you have traction, if you suspect that you have traction alopecia, to be honest with you, my first line of action is stop doing all your bad practices.
Yes.
Leave it for at least 2 months. If you don't notice any improvement, you need to go and book in and see somebody.
That's a really good point because the first thing she asked me was, are you still planning on styling this way? Because even though I had noticed the damage, I was still, doing the styling. And I think it's can be a bit of a vicious cycle because the damage is there. Yes. It's not pretty. And so you want to try and cover it up. Yes. And a lot of that styling is what helps you to cover it up. Yes. So I think for me, probably psychologically, it was good to sit with somebody. And it might just be because I have that kind of background. Somebody that I felt kind of was giving me information that was factual.
When you say you have that kind of background, just for those who may not have come across you on our platform, your background.
So I'm a pharmacist by profession. So when I say that background, I'm kind of referring to probably like a consulting healthcare kind of background where you're sitting with somebody and having a conversation to identify what the problem is, why that problem is there, and what can be done about it, which is almost kind of like a science approach in a way.
It is.
Yeah. So, and that's
one of the reasons I called you an informed consumer.
Yeah. And so the kind of next phase of the journey then started. So one of the options I was given was to try a treatment called minoxidil in topical form as a cream. So minoxidil is a drug product.
Sorry. Before you talk about minoxidil, I kind of want to explore with you some of the emotional aspects
of it
that actually even led you to seek that medical help, because that is medical help, right? Because I think sometimes a lot of people underestimate how much your lost edges can really affect how you feel.
Yeah.
Not least because you can see thriving hair in other areas, but that area, because it's forefront, can really make you feel down because you know it doesn't look as it should. So what was some of
I actually had it all the way around to the back. Obviously, it was worse on the front than it was at the back. I think it's not easy, and that's why I talked about time. And every individual will have a slightly different experience. I'm generally a bit of a easy-go-lucky person. I try not to overthink things. I try not to put too much importance on myself, you know. Hence, I'm wearing this hat today.
It's a nice hat.
Thank you very much.
I'm getting one, exactly the same.
Okay, tell me when you're wearing yours. And so I think because I am kind of naturally that way, the first thing I had to do was to try not to overthink it, and also try not to take on too much what I think or thought other people's opinion would be. So that was the first. I think for me, it started with a mental decision, then followed by the steps that needed to come. And the reason I said that was because one of the things I was told in the clinic is you're going to have to stop all that practices. You're going to have to stop braiding your hair. You're going to have to stop wearing weaves. In fact, the lady said to me, if you can avoid wearing wigs, because at some point I would wear wigs like the whole day. Like we're talking up to 12 hours. And this would tie. And everybody's different. You know, some people, it doesn't affect them. But in that process of learning, I realized that I had really, really, really delicate hair strands.
I think a lot of people underestimate the damage that even a wig can cause to their edges, especially if they have compromised edges. I think you're right. A lot of people can wear wigs for the whole day.
Yes.
And it's absolutely fine for them because their edges haven't been compromised. And even if they lose a little bit of hair, may not be as noticeable because they have thick and full edges. But one of the things that I definitely advise my clients to do is to reduce the use of wigs, because at the end of the day, anything that puts pressure on your edges for long periods of time will have an impact on your scalp. And it's the same sometimes with bonnets. Sometimes I see people wearing bonnets for longer than bedtime. Right? They're wearing it in the house all the time. And that can also compromise. But you know, you said something about you're kind of easygoing, don't really like to place too much emphasis on. And I know that because I know you. But my experience with my lost edges were completely different. I was very emotional about my lost edges. And I was very emotional about my lost edges because it was damage that I had done, inflicted on myself. And I think I just could not believe that I let it get to that point. And so I was really disappointed in myself. I say sometimes that there's something very powerful about sitting with damage and then repairing from a damaged point. And I'm glad I did, because a lot of the lessons that I've learned from recovering my edges to where, not 100%, but to where they are today means that I would never do some of the things that, I'd done in the past for my edges. But let me let you continue.
And I agree with that. There were emotional moments. I won't lie about that or deny it. But I think that's why I said for me, it was a mental journey first before then the actual, whether it was the applying the minoxidil, because I had to actually stop all those styling practices.
And how was that? How did that feel?
It was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard. We're talking about how hard as like, I come to Lagos quite often. And every time I come to Lagos, standard practice, you braid your hair.
Yeah.
In fact, there was this style I did once, like everyone was just raving about that hairstyle. And I was like, this is my hairstyle. But I couldn't do it again.
Yeah.
As beautiful as I felt that I was with that hairstyle, it was actually damaging my hair more. And so I had to really, really sit with that. I got comments like, oh, are you going out with your hair like that? Yeah.
When you decided not to use
When I decided not to do anything. So no wigs, no weaves. I stopped braiding, and I was literally doing things like 2-strand twist or like a wash and go. So basically stopping any practice. And I probably went extreme. I went extreme because I was on a mission. And I was on a mission not just to grow back my edges, but to also strip myself of people's opinion about how I should look or what was supposed to be a standard, because my goal was to have healthy hair and to grow my edges back. So I was probably very extreme. I was very extreme. So in terms of how did I get support? How did people respond to it? Like I said, some people say like, are you going out with your hair like that? I think it was mixed. It was in ebbs and tides. Sometimes I would want to cover up. So most of the time it would be like maybe scarves. I would wear maybe like a little bit of a hairband. And then other times I'll just be like, I don't care. I think for me, it was very much, sometimes like a roller coaster, because sometimes I'll just wake up and be like, I don't care. If anybody thinks I'm looking like a village girl today, I actually don't care. And I think also I probably had a bit of a subtle support in the professional sphere. And I know a lot of people, and we've had these conversations, especially in the environment that we live in, and how Afro-textured hair is viewed in professional environments. I work, predominantly in hospital environments. And in those environments, I think appearance is more about, are you clean? Are you coming to work hygienic? Because obviously that's our focus as opposed to, are you coming to work slaying and looking like your edges are good? So I would generally go to work looking like that. 2-strand twist, like I just rolled out of bed sometimes.
For me, it was really, really difficult because I was that girl that bought expensive Brazilian hair, whatever type of hair, wore the weaves, wore the wigs. My very close friend at the time, is a top weave installer. So I always looked good where hair was concerned. So I then had to kind of move away completely from that, which, to be honest with you, also affected relationships, because you then started to relate differently and don't really relate on a hair type thing. But it was very difficult for me because my group of friends or wore weaves, wigs, that kind of look.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I'm not really one of the gang anymore.
Yeah.
So I felt it. And even though nobody said anything,
You just feel it.
you feel it. You feel it when nobody's complimenting your hair anymore. You know, when you were wearing those weaves and you've just been weaved out, for want of a better word, you get loads of compliments. Where did you get your hair from? Who did your hair? Nobody asked who did your hair because everybody knew who did my hair at the time. But, you know, and those compliments dropped off, right? And then when we go out to dinner, I'm the only one with natural hair, and everybody has that aesthetics that I, at one time, subscribed to, and the aesthetics that I still saw that everybody kind of celebrated.
Yeah.
So I did feel a little bit lonely, and I also felt that I didn't look as great as I did in those hairstyles. But like you, there was something bigger now that I was aspiring to. Healthier hair, and also a better part to show my daughter what our hair could do when well cared for. And also I was really then conscious that I didn't want her to think that her hair wasn't good enough. But for me, it was super emotional. I remember psyching myself up in the mirror to go out. Like
I can relate to that, definitely.
Yeah, to go out. And I remember thinking, okay, now that I don't have the long weaves, I got to do a little bit better on my makeup. I got to do even, better on my fashion, but not too much fashion probably, but more makeup. I definitely had to make an extra effort with makeup. And I had to be extra careful about how I styled my hair because I wasn't starting from healthy hair.
Yeah.
I was starting from really damaged and compromised edges. And, there's nothing that ages you more than damaged edges.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned.
It does age you.
It really ages you. And there's nothing that makes your hairstyle look shitty than compromised edges. But the point was, I had to think to myself, where do you want to be in 5 years' time?
Bringing us back to that time factor. And not to say that I didn't have moments where I was just like, forget this, and I just put a wig on. The weaves, I definitely didn't struggle with stopping. Those were like out straight away. But, there were times where I was like, oh, I can't figure out how to make this hair look tidy or how to make it look nice enough for an event. And I would put a wig on and just go with the flow. But then come back afterwards feeling like, oh, I've just done my edges a disservice. Yeah. It sounds really strange saying it now. Like I've done my edges a disservice because I just gave in and didn't stick to that whole process of, just avoid this styling. So the weaves, the braids were easy to let go of. But then I kind of went to the ponytails and the pull-in and that,
right.
For somebody like me, and I know it will be different for everyone, which is why it's important for each individual to identify where the problems are, where the sources of the losses. Even tight ponytails, those really gelled down, and they looked good even with the edges not being healthy because you gave an illusion with those styles. But that tension was still creating damage. So I started the treatment or the process with the clinic.
Treatment?
So it was minoxidil.
And what did they take you through in terms of what were the options that were presented and how did you decide on minoxidil?
So because it was alopecia linked to traction and the follicles were not damaged, minoxidil was pretty much first line offer. The other was, if you don't want to use the minoxidil, then you can take things like supplements and then just stop all the practices. But I was like, I think I felt at that point that I needed a bit more help on starting the process. So we talked through like any kind of, it was prescribed by them. I know people now you can buy it and all that kind of stuff, but I'm always very particular that if I'm going to be using something that is quote unquote a drug product, I want to I don't want to be self-using. I want it to be with clinical sort of guidance.
What percentage?
So what I was prescribed was 10%.
Okay.
And it was formulated in a cream formulation. And I had to actually, because of the strength of it, I had to use it gradually and build up on it because side effects.
Typically you would get 5%. I mean, I know there's 2% on the market, but the results on that is mixed. Yeah. So 5% and upwards is what I'm familiar with for the kind of issue that we're talking about. So 10%, I actually haven't heard that.
I think it was 10% at the time. And so they obviously said you build up on it. It was very tiny amounts. We talked about side effects, some of which I did get, I think. And I was told from the onset, look, you're talking about at least a 6 months period before you will start seeing any kind of result. In fact, she told me you may see that there is some hair loss when you start. So they talked about, and you're more the expert, they talked about like the stage of hair growth and what will happen when I start using it. Yeah. And so it may appear that I was actually losing more hair initially. And so that's time. Yeah. So so she said, don't even expect to see anything happening in the first 6 months. So I was then given a 6 months appointment to go back. And then we kind of carried on from there. So I used minoxidil consistently for about a period of 1.5 years.
Right. And what was the result like?
It was good. It was good, but it wasn't great.
Right.
But and I think probably is, again, my background, but what I saw was I didn't see the damage getting any worse.
Yes.
I just saw a stable improvement. I wouldn't say that the hair just grew all of a sudden. And you've seen some of my before and after pictures.
Absolutely.
And so the hair loss actually stopped. But when I went back for the consultation, she then said, well, some of that is because you've actually stopped
the practices
as well. And she said, if you can definitely carry on without those practices, because she said one of the things that happen is when people start seeing that the hair is growing, they go back to those, very heavy, kind of pressure styling.
It's that vicious circle. I mean, even before a lot of people go for help, they take out the braids. They notice that all the edges or some of the edges have been lost. And they take a break. And then they take a break. And then it grows back. And then they go back to those same hairstyles. And what they don't realize is even your edges keep receipts. And after a while, your follicles just are so weak that they literally give up on you. Yeah. So you're absolutely right.
At one point, it literally looked like a receding hairline. I don't think I realized it until I saw the pictures. Because sometimes you're not seeing what's happening on the top of your head, right? Just at the front. And it was when they took the pictures in the clinic and they were showing it to me.
And you were horrified.
And I was horrified.
I don't think a lot of people, you're absolutely right. One thing that I see is a lot of people have the lost edges and they're not stopping the braids. They're just moving the braids backwards. So instead of the braid starting here, it's now starting here.
And there's a gelling down.
And there's exactly
ways to kind of hide
it. And I'm like, just stop this practice.
It's hard.
I know it's hard. If I've not been through that process, I would not be saying just stop. But I've been through that process. It is very difficult, but if you don't stop, what you're gonna have is irreparable damage on your hands.
And the thing is, some people may argue and say, well, the stylist should maybe say, nobody's gonna tell you, sis, I don't think you should be doing this hairstyle. You don't really have edges.
In fact, good stylist will tell you.
Well, a good stylist
may even refuse.
That is like an excellent stylist that will refuse. But I've even seen posts on social media where that stylist's USP
is to mask the damage
your edges.
By putting more damage on it.
And even that in itself is a market.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I had to really say, for me, nobody's going to come and save you.
That's my jingle.
That's your jingle. And it wasn't easy. And coupled with that, was the scalp problem. So I had already used all the products, talk about it up until that point. So
did you try anything apart from minoxidil?
So just the usual, castor oil.
Oh, yes. One of my favorite.
Castor oil.
Just for those who are listening, castor oil has honestly no backing.
I even put castor oil on my brows. Apparently it grows hair.
No backing for growing hair. It may give the appearance that the hair is growing just because it's so viscous, it's so thick. The fibers may appear to be thicker. But the problem with castor oil is it can actually be doing more damage because it's clogging.
It definitely for me
pores.
was, because the other part of the challenge that I have was the dry scalp.
Yes.
So it then became even more obvious to me that I can't be putting anything and everything on my scalp was dry, it was very sensitive. Even things like sulfur 8. Like I had people.
Before we go into the scalp, so the minoxidil did work.
It did work.
But you made a really great point. And this is where I always tell people to start with, which is just stop the practice and let's see what happens. Because a lot of people buy growth oils on the internet, or even brands push growth oils on you. Yeah. And you see, the growth oil is not doing much, but you've stopped the practice and you've given your scalp a break and your hair has grown back, but you are attributing that to the growth oil that you started using around the same time.
Yeah.
My advice, just stop the practice, and then let's see where your hair or your scalp is in about 2 months' time. So it's really interesting that you went to a practitioner that attributed the results that you saw with both stopping that practice and the minoxidil as well.
To be honest, if I remember very well, one of the things that she said was, you will get this cream and we expect, and they explained that it's not 100% effective, and it definitely isn't effective for everybody.
Yes.
So therefore, your expectations are managed. But one of the things I definitely took away is, if you're not ready to actually remove the root cause of the problem, you probably wouldn't get a long-lasting effect. And my goal was a long-lasting effect, not just a quick growth and then it all gets damaged again because I've reintroduced what was causing the damage. Yeah.
Some people may be wondering if I've tried minoxidil. I've never tried minoxidil. And so the next thing is, why not? I'm lazy. This is the honest
Compliance
truth.
is key.
Because you have to be compliant.
Yeah.
And so you have to use it, once every day?
So it started as, I think, once a week.
Once a week.
And then I built up on it.
Okay.
And then they also say that if you're getting any kind of side effects, to then reduce it. I think I only got up to maybe using it 3 times a week.
Okay, so that's even better. I thought it was you had to use it every day. So for me, when I stopped all the practices, the hair grew back to a certain amount. And, in the end, I was just okay with it. It doesn't mean that I'm still not going to at some point go for an assessment, because this side, the left-hand side, is way worse than the right-hand side. And I think that it could do with a little bit of improvement.
Yeah.
And I may try, maybe not minoxidil, maybe PRP.
Yeah.
Maybe something else. But I'm still up for that.
So minoxidil I haven't used for probably about a year now.
And did the hair fall back? Because some people...
No. I didn't get, and yes, I have heard that, that for some, when they stop
using it,
they get like a withdrawal hair loss. I didn't have that. And I could be wrong, but I think I attribute some of that to the fact that I had stopped the practices that was damaging my hair. And I still don't. I've kind of carried that on.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've maybe introduced some styling back that I had completely gotten rid of, but I just, when I guess what maybe you'd call cold turkey, I was like, look, I'm either doing this or I'm not doing this.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting thing as well about introducing some styling back, because I don't think that the point that I would like to make to some people is that you can never do X amount of styling again. I still do braids. I mean, I'm wearing braids right now, but the frequency is what has drastically changed.
Yeah.
So I now braid my hair maybe once a year. I don't think I'll braid it more than once a year, twice at the very most.
Yeah.
But no more than twice a year.
Yeah, like I've definitely reintroduced wigs. You know, I do.
I don't like wigs much. I find it very uncomfortable. That's one of the reasons why I don't
have
actually
a small head. It's okay.
draw for wigs. I find wigs quite uncomfortable. In fact, even outside of the discomfort, the process of putting my hair in cornrows all the way to the back, I would always have to go to a salon to do that because the length of my hair makes it a little bit challenging to put it in those cornrows myself. And then when I think about how much manipulation the hair salon would put on my hair just to put it in cornrows to the back, I just like give up. I'll just go two-strand twist and that's
why
it.
I don't really chase length much, because that too comes with its voila. So my short hair works for me.
Can you put it in cornrows by yourself?
No, I can't. Well, you know I can't weave or braid my hair.
Then there's the hope this point still remains.
So I'm blessed with friends who can do my hair.
That. But okay, so minoxidil did something for you and actually stopping the practices did something for you. How do you feel now about your edges?
I feel a lot more confident. They're not where I wish them to be, but I feel a lot more confident just having my hair out, you know, going out with my hair, wearing my hair to occasion and just maybe doing a twist out or even just doing like all back cornrows are like they're my go-to style now,
For me, all back cornrows, they're so beautiful, so simple, right?
Yeah.
So you're completely confident in your hairs. I'm not completely happy with my edges, but I have accepted it. But I may still try some interventions. And, you know, just to those who are listening, one intervention that we don't speak about often enough is implants, hair transplants.
Hair transplants,
for that area. I have had 3 clients, at least, who have actually tried it.
Okay.
2 wonderful
outcomes.
Okay.
Like
outcomes that have blown my mind. Like if I don't think that my edges are at that point where it needs that level of intervention. But if it was, it's definitely something that I would consider. I find it really strange that we don't talk about it more within the hair care community, within the Afro-textured hair care community.
As in the hair transplant itself or edges?
Hair transplant for edges as a solution. So we talk about grow oils, we talk about minoxidil, we talk about, I'm seeing more and more people try PRP.
There's one I saw the other day, electrolysis or something?
Yes. And all these things are supposed to kind of stimulate the follicles to, you know, engender growth.
Yeah.
But we don't talk about when all those things don't work, what is the option available? And hair transplant is an option that I really want people to explore. Perhaps in the next series, we will do
something a
podcast with a surgeon specifically on that. But 3 clients at least have had hair transplants for their edges. And as I said, blown my mind, blown my mind, the results. Of course, it is quite invasive.
Yes.
The downtime, you need to recover, the process looks gruesome.
I guess there's also probably the possibility of rejection, like you would get with any kind of transplant.
I'm not so fluent on it, but I know for certain that it works for certain types of alopecia more than others. Traction alopecia is one of those that it is much more able to help than other types of alopecia, for example. So for those with traction alopecia who have tried everything, that is an option that I think that is worth exploring. Exploring, I say, I'm not saying for sure go and do it. Just explore, but know that it is
there.
It is there as an option. I do know for balance, one person that it didn't really work out for.
Okay.
My understanding is that that person had some underlying health issues and she may not have been the right candidate for it. But it is an option. So we've talked about edges.
Yes.
I think we've exhausted it. I think we can agree that it is one area that we see loads of women struggle in. I want to wrap up on edges by saying the best thing you can do for your edges is to actually prevent the damage in the first instance. And that means being responsible with your hairstyling. That means no back-to-back hairstyling, moving from braids to weave, from weaves to wigs, and just not giving it a break. Just understanding that that area is more delicate than any other area on your scalp. And so therefore, if you sustain damage to that area, you are actually in danger of irreparable damage if you don't stop the damage. So prevention is better than cure is my number one mantra where it comes to your edges.
Definitely. And I think the only thing I'll probably add to that is give yourself time. And trust the process. And, find the people that will support you along the journey, because I think it would have been so much, much harder if I didn't have that community of support around me.
Now, I'm going to say something because you said community of support. Sometimes you're not going to get support.
Yeah, you're not.
And sometimes you have to be prepared to go alone without support. And let me finish. And it may mean that your support is not in your community.
That's what I
Find a new tribe.
Yeah. That's what, when I say community, not necessarily the people that are physically around you. It may be an online community. It may even be actually taking that step to go to a clinic that specializes in that sort of hair loss, and there are a number of them that do offer support as well.
Yeah. So I'm definitely for support. I don't feel that, I think maybe I had an online community that didn't know me, but I knew them. But I definitely didn't have support, a support network around me at the time that I was going through my journey. So the next kind of topic that I want us to explore is scalp conditions and scalp issues. Now, this is something that I've had to really educate myself on over the years because I've never had any scalp issues.
Lucky you.
I've never. And it makes me more curious. It made me more curious, and I am less likely to dismiss the impact that having a scalp condition has on some people. So maybe let me start by asking you to take us through your scalp journey.
The scalp issue for me was actually a lot more emotionally difficult than the edges. Because we're talking literally about you're sat somewhere and I look back and there's like flakes all on the back of my black cute dress or something like that. Or I'm sat somewhere and like I'm doing this because the side of my scalp is itching because my scalp had become so dry at that point. And as far as I can remember, I think the time I noticed it in particular, I remember as a young child, like Yoruba people call it Ela, is that cradle cap?
Yes.
Yeah. So I know that my parents talked about that. And I know that like maybe when I was in primary school, I had like treatments like agbo, those are herbs, local herbs, and just on and off. It wasn't anything chronic. I don't have any proof for this, but I am convinced relaxers introduce that imbalance I'm not saying maybe he
may
wasn't.
be.
Yeah,
I mean,
I am
just
convinced.
because-
I've done some research. I don't have any proof, but
just because you don't have any proof or it's not been reported doesn't mean it's not true. We have to understand that, science is not all knowing. Science is what? The pursuit of knowledge and it is continuous.
Yeah.
And it is continuous. So science may catch up with that gap with that knowledge in that relaxers may exacerbate certain conditions.
What I'm definitely sure of is that the older I got, the worse it became.
Right.
Maybe it could just be that the older I got, the more self-conscious and self-aware I became. So that patchy part of my scalp that was very dry and flaky, was more noticeable. Also, the older I got, the more styling of my hair that I did. And a lot of those styles, those very elaborate braids or Ghana weaving, what's the word? Brought it even more to the forefront. And so it would get worse and worse. Sometimes it would resolve because it is kind of weather dependent as well, especially as I obviously live predominantly in the UK where, we go through winter seasons.
Yeah.
And during the winter seasons, it gets really dry. And so for me, the scalp issue was definitely a lot more emotionally challenging.
Okay, so what was the diagnosis of what was going on with your scalp?
So the first time I actually went, generally we use this word dandruff.
Yes.
And I've always known of dandruff, and growing up, you had the Head and Shoulders and all that kind of stuff. And I attributed dandruff to your hair not being clean. So if you wash your hair, you won't have dandruff. But dandruff is actually a bit of an incorrect term that people use generally to cover a variety of scalp conditions.
Yeah, very true.
So the first time I actually went to see somebody about it was a GP, and we're talking probably over 20 years ago now. And she looked at it. I'm sure she must have maybe said something like dandruff as well. And then just prescribed me like a topical steroid solution, which I started using. But then I reacted to it.
Okay.
I think it was just too strong because the scalp was sensitive and it was dry. I was then given a steroid solution to apply to it without actually establishing what the problem or the cause of the problem was. So after that experience, and I used it like maybe 1 or 2 times, and I just saw my scalp almost weeping. I stopped, obviously, wasn't compliant, and then I just carried on. So it then became this act of, okay, the hair is dry and flaky, I'll wash it. And then also certain products flared it up. And I didn't realize that. I remember there was, I'm not I want to be careful not to name product names to make it seem as if, but there was a product everybody was raving about back when I was in uni. I think it was called Dr. Miracle or something like that. And they'd be like, oh, have you tried that on your scalp? And so I was using it because of the dry scalp. But it actually made my scalp worse.
Yeah, not surprising. And you know what? Don't feel bad naming the product because it had nothing to do with the product.
Yeah.
It simply is.
Which is why
your scalp,
educating yourself is so important.
It is not that any product, my product can trigger a flare-up in somebody that has very sensitive scalp, but who needs to keep their scalp clear of any products.
Yeah. So that just carried on for years, and I just kind of lived with it, didn't pay particular attention to it. And remember, in all those years, I was relaxing. And so sometimes with relaxed hair, and this is just my experience, I think it was easy to hide some of the underlying issues. When I decided to stop relaxing my hair, my Afro hair was just exposing everything because my hair is very, very curly,
right?
Very prone to tangles. And so what I started seeing was you'd see the flake hanging in the curls, like literally. And so to me, it became more obvious. And just the cycle of, washing, trying to find solutions, putting on a lot of oils, because some people's theory is that you need to oil your scalp and all this, and they're not seeing results. I think proper solutions started about, I think it's now 2.5 years ago. You told me to go and see a dermatologist.
Yeah.
And I was in Lagos at the time.
Yeah.
I think I'd been lamenting to you on the phone about, and that was probably one of the first times I was noticing a flare-up in Lagos. Because usually when I'm in Lagos, the weather is mostly humid. Even when I come in the rainy season and stuff like that, I don't really notice it. But that particular year, I think it must have been around Christmas as well, it was just really bad. And you said you recommended somebody. And I went to see her, and it was like my eyes were open for the first time. And I'm just going to quickly caveat and say sometimes it's also finding clinicians who are familiar with Afro-Caribbean, hair, skin, finding the right people, because it wasn't the first time I was going to see a clinician. Yes, it was definitely the first time I was going to see someone who had experience in dermatology in particular. And it was like an eye-opener. Even all the stuff and the assessments that they did, I was like, now, wow, this is like next level. They took a biopsy. She examined the scalp really closely, showed me, I'd never seen my scalp that close up before, and then gave a diagnosis. And it was seborrheic dermatitis.
Yeah.
They don't know the cause. It's very common, and a lot of people call it dandruff.
Very, very common. It's the bane of a lot of my clients' lives. And I think I'll let you continue, but a lot of my clients take a wrong approach to, say again, I always get that word tangled, seborrheic dermatitis. They take a wrong approach in that they think they will find a cure.
Yeah.
And I'm at pains to say it is something that you may have to manage for the rest of your life. And like you noticed that some weather conditions meant that it was flared up. Some people it's stress that flares it up. Some people it's food. Some people it's alcohol that flares it up. And it's just something that needs to be managed. A lot of times I refer people to either a dermatologist or a trichologist, and they're almost reluctant because they're like, well, you're a hair coach. And I'm like, what I can do is help you grow healthy hair, retain length if that's what you want. But when it comes to scalp health and scalp conditions, I mean, scalp health I can help you with if you have no issues. But when it comes to the condition of the scalp that you're experiencing, you need intervention. And I'm so glad you went to see the dermatologist in this Lagos that we're in.
And
right
I
now.
would say it like, I wouldn't see a dermatologist in the UK.
I have great dermatologists that I can refer you to in the UK, mind you.
Have they looked at your scalp? Have they? Well,
I have no, because let's be frank, the marker that you said is, which I agree with, is somebody that has experience with
enough.
Afro-textured hair,
and
skin and scalp, right? Skin, face or scalp. And so there are people in the UK that tick all those boxes. And actually, some of them are not Black. One of the best practitioners in this area is not Black, but she has loads of experience because our cohort of clients fall within that demography.
Yeah.
But
so, experience for the clinician is very important.
Yeah.
And so the process of diagnosis, and she spoke about it, and then said these are the recommendations. And
can you just tell us a little bit? Because some people still think they have dandruff and that's what they have. Can you just tell us what she told you about?
Okay. So it wasn't like, it's not dandruff. But like I said, dandruff is used for as a term to cover so many things. But I think dandruff is more what you see as a result of the condition. So it's almost like saying rash. But what is causing the rash might be like an allergic reaction to something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so dandruff is the symptom, if I can put it that way. And the underlying cause is a skin condition that is called seborrheic dermatitis. Dermatitis in itself, and please don't quote me, I'm not the expert in this area. My understanding is it's kind of like an inflammation of the derma, which is the surface of...
Which can be triggered by anything.
And seborrhosis has a definition as well. And so in my case, she was like, it's either just something that has happened over time. She can't say that it's particularly this.
Or something that you've always had. Bearing in mind, you said you've always had a mild scalp issue even as a child. So it may be something that is just within your genetic predisposition.
I was going to then say that there is certain types of seborrheic dermatitis that's a result of like fungal infections.
Yes.
So that also had to be explored and assessed. And actually one of the treatments...
Biopsy, is that why she took a biopsy?
Yeah, that's why they took the biopsy. And in fact, one of the course of treatments that I was given was a number of days of antifungals.
To clear. If it was...
Like you call it kind of almost like an empirical treatment. You give it as a baseline before you then ascertain. So they took the biopsy, but she'd given me those prescriptions and things. So we talked about various ways to manage it. And some of them were actually even including diet.
Yes, absolutely.
But she then also prescribed me a steroid solution. But this time around, I was well informed.
Right.
I understood what the purpose of the steroid solution was. And the steroid solution was mainly to calm down the exacerbation, which at the time I saw her, I was having.
Yes.
So
I needed a crisis.
Exactly. So to calm down the exacerbation, and she actually said, you can't use it too much because it could make your scalp become highly sensitive, and that in itself could cause a problem, which when I think back on it, that's what happened the first time a GP prescribed it to me. So this then now also needed time. It was because I was like, so how long do I need to do all these things for? And she was like, literally, this is going to have to become a routine that you implement for the next however many weeks until we see an improvement, and then you will switch your routine to like a maintenance. So when I first saw her, I had to wash my hair every week. She prescribed a particular type of shampoo. I couldn't apply heat because I'd washed the hair, then applied the steroid solution. It was very prescriptive. You know, I had to take certain, like she would prescribe me vitamin E, the antifungals, because we were dealing with an exacerbation that needed to be treated before we then moved into maintaining. And then the maintenance was now a case of there's certain oils you can't put on your hair.
Yes.
That was like news to me. I thought oil helps. No, your scalp produces sebum.
Yep.
If you over-secrete or over-stimulate the production of sebum, that in itself can flare up things like dry scalp, seborrheic dermatitis. So it was a bit of a relearning because standard practice was if my scalp was dry or started feeling a bit itchy, I'll start oiling it or greasing it.
And this is the point where some people will say, oh, but I oil my scalp and nothing happens. You don't have an issue.
Yeah.
You don't have a condition. Some people may be able to get away with oiling their scalp, and some people, it will exacerbate their problem.
Yeah. So this is like I was saying 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's been a learning process. There's certain things I just wouldn't put on my hair, on my scalp. There's certain kind of styling products I wouldn't put on my scalp because anything can flare it up.
Absolutely.
You know, even hard water sometimes.
Absolutely.
You know, definitely the weather. So it's just actually bearing that in mind and implementing those healthy air practices that you talk about regularly. So if I go anything more than 10 days without washing my hair,
it will flare up.
I am guaranteed. And not saying that you then start living this kind of very restricted. I just know that that's going to happen and I already know how I'm going to deal with it. Because there's sometimes life is busy, you know, you're busy, your
Absolutely.
schedule is busy.
Absolutely.
So because I now understood it better, emotionally, I was able to deal.
Absolutely.
Because if I had gone a number of days and I hadn't washed my hair and I got a flare up, that just really used to get me down because I'll be like, why is this happening? And feel like I was the one responsible in a way. But now I know that, okay, that's going to happen, but I know what I'm going to do when it happens, you know.
And so what you've kind of outlined there is a way to manage. And that's what I noted in the beginning, that this condition is something that the person suffering from it will have to manage probably for the rest of their life. It is not something that you just cure, because that is something that really frustrates a lot of my clients. I still had one person last week say, oh, Titi, I went to see a scalp therapist. And you know, this is another thing. Guys, I recognize the profession of a dermatologist. I recognize the profession of a trichologist. I don't know what you're talking about when you say you've gone to see a scalp therapist. So please, and I'm not saying this is wrong. I just don't know. I've never heard of them. But if you're wanting to seek help, if you need help in this area, please, can we start with a dermatologist or a trichologist first before any whizzy sounding profession? But it is something that may need to be managed for the rest of your life. So then you may not get a one-off cure, which a lot of people seem to want.
I've not had flare-ups for
months.
10 months.
Yeah.
No issues. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, something, I don't know.
And you know, with flare-ups sometimes, as we said, stress, diet, alcohol, a change in weather.
Yeah.
And that could be sudden coldness, sudden hotness.
Heat. Yeah.
Those can cause it. I think I mentioned stress because I know that is for sure one of the things that can trigger a flare-up as well. So trying to manage those things as well.
Yeah.
Trying to eat better.
You know, diet was definitely one of the things the dermatologist discussed with me, certain types of food that promote a good sort of skin flora.
Do you want to mention
so
some?
I mentioned one that definitely I saw the effect immediately. Locust beans.
Yeah. I knew you were going to say that.
In fact, at one point, I was pan frying like rice and locust beans.
Oh,
you know, I do crazy things with food. But it was nice.
I mean, I like locust beans. Well, I'm an Ondo girl, so
locust beans taste great. It's just the smell that a lot of people can't.
I love it. I love the taste, but I'm an Ondo girl proper, and so we go with ogiri,
which is more fermented.
And I believe even more potent.
So fermented food, kimchi.
Do you know what?
Which I can't really stand.
Do you know what? I don't mind it, but I really there's something about. Okay, I'm going to say something that some people may find controversial. I find it really irritating when Africans, Nigerians in particular, keep going on about the benefits of fermented food, and kimchi is the first thing they mentioned. You didn't, because you mentioned iru. But come on, we have iru, we have ogiri, we have ogi, we have eko, we have.
I think I was referring to
gari, we have
your
fufu.
UK clientele who
all of that is in the UK.
Kimchi's
we have
more sophisticated.
We have fufu, we have gari, we have cassava, we have help me out.
So locust
here.
beans and ogi were my two. Those were
okay, but you know, if you can't stand the smell of those things, add in some ogi, add in some eba, or some just drink your gari. Papa fufu is amazing. You know, we have loads of options within our cultural diet, so you don't have to kind of go for all these kimchis and
foreign stuff.
But you know, if you like them, of course, go for them. But yeah, those fermented things are really fantastic. They're also fantastic for your gut health. Yeah.
So that was another thing I was going to mention. Gut health definitely links to your skin health as well. So yeah, and I think for me, it's that being aware of the state of my scalp. Like I'm constant. If I'm sat in any salon or under anyone's chair or anything like that, you know, that is my first priority before styling.
So you said something that I think a lot of people still struggle with. You said if you go over 10 days without washing your scalp, that you know that you're going to have a flare up. One of the things that I always tell my clients with those who have those is you do need to get on top of cleansing your scalp regularly
definitely.
and cleansing your scalp with an effective shampoo. So what?
I don't use sulfate-free shampoos. I don't.
Yeah.
I just don't.
It would not be effective for you.
Yeah, I don't. So it has to be a clarifying shampoo. I also use certain shampoos that have an active product called ketoconazole. Not even ketoconazole is an antifungal. And that has been shown to help reduce flare-ups because there is that fungal influence and it's skin flora. So we do have that live on our skin as well as, you know, on the scalp. There's pollution, dirt and all that. So I alternate between those two.
You've just said something really, really amazing. And I want to touch on it because a lot of people think that when I say this, it's because I want to sell a product. Some people will do best by just sticking with a clarifying shampoo as their main wash because of their scalp health needs.
Yeah.
But we've also positioned clarifying shampoo as the harsher type of shampoo that should only be used sparingly once a month. And it's not the case.
I know you didn't like to plug your product, but me, I'm going to plug. Doo-doo definitely does not strip your hair.
It doesn't strip your hair. It's my regular shampoo unless I want to do a clay wash.
So
and I have to be honest with you, these days, my time for reaching for a clay wash is less and less and less. So a clarifying shampoo, my clarifying shampoo is more my go-to because it doesn't strip.
Yeah.
So but I say that to say, when you know you have a scalp condition and issue, please at least go and visit somebody and make sure that you're sticking as closely to their recommendation, which often is not going to be used exclusively a sulfate-free shampoo.
Yeah. To be honest with you, that's a completely different topic of conversation. I don't actually agree with sulfate-free shampoos, but that's a story for another day.
that is a story for another day. So the newer ones on the generation, I will be honest with you, can be very effective. Okay. I think that a sulfate-free shampoo can be a part of a healthy hair approach. Just the same way in the same way that we have different cleansers for skin, that can be very, very useful, is the same way that we should have different cleansers for our scalp and our hair. So for example, I use an oil cleanser in the morning, typically in the morning, but I don't use an oil cleanser consistently or exclusively on my skin. I go in with a salicylic acid, but knowing when to use a sulfate-free shampoo, when to use a clarifying shampoo, and doing that can be a part of a healthier. So I'm not against sulfate-free shampoo. I'm against how people use
them
it exclusively.
Yeah. So I think for me, that emotional burden definitely lifted because I understand better what is happening with my scalp and how to manage it and how to kind of look after it. So shout out to Dr. Falakemi. She's the dermatologist I saw in Lagos.
We will put her details in the show notes for those who are in Lagos, and we may just add some other dermatologists and trichologists in the UK who may be able to help. So let's wrap up. How do you feel now about your scalp health?
I think I feel a lot more confident. And when the hectic schedules of life means that I'm not paying as much attention, I don't feel so sad about it or so guilty about it because I know how to deal with it and get back on top of things. So
It's been wonderful having you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very pleased with where you are on your hair journey. I think you are definitely a friend that we've been growing together in different avenues, different areas, and I look forward to more growth together beyond hair.
My waist-length hair at 50. Check it out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, so we've come to the end of another episode where I take your hair care question. This one says, Dear Titi, what role does diet/nutrition play in achieving strong, vibrant hair? I think it plays a role, but I don't want to overestimate what role that is. You will hear some people say, actually, the role is minimal. I completely disagree. I think there is a role, but let's not over egg how much of a role that plays in your hair health. And I'm just going to use myself as an example. And it's obviously anecdotal evidence, but it is evidence nonetheless. When I was doing my bodybuilding competition, I ate so much protein. Never eaten that much protein in my life, and never have since then eaten that much protein in my life. As well as eating as much protein, I ate loads of vegetables, specifically broccoli, green vegetables, kale, spinach, because they are nutritionally very dense. What I observed was my hair grew longer than I ever had imagined. Now, I actually wasn't on a healthy hair journey then, but I definitely noticed the improvement in how quickly my hair grew and the health of my hair. When you look at the research, when you look at the science, it tells us that nutrition plays a role. But you have to eat healthily, consistently. People would say, what exact foods should they eat? And I would say, actually, it's your whole diet that matters. When you're thinking about diet, think about making sure you're eating enough lean proteins, making sure that you're getting enough fats in your diet, and that can be through eating things like mackerel, salmon, sardines. Or if you hate fish, perhaps think about supplementing with a supplement, so something like an omega-3. I would say double down on your vegetables, and I would say prioritize those green vegetables as well. So your kale, your spinach, your efotete if you're in Nigeria, those sort of things. Even your okra can have really great benefits for your hair. Beyond nutrition, sleep, manage stress better. But yes, I am a huge advocate for using nutrition, especially as you get into your 40s. Nutrition becomes even more important then. So yes, do incorporate diet, good nutrition into your healthy hair journey.